Bisbee, Arizona was a major copper-producing center built on the steep canyon slopes east of the Mule Mountains. The area's mines produced large quantities of malachite and other minerals. Bisbee is 92 miles southeast of Tucson and 11 miles north of the Mexico border. It is one of the world's richest mineral sites, resulting in what was once the largest city between St. Louis and San Francisco. Bisbee's unique history attracts thousands of tourists every year. It also boasts of having the best climate year-round by the locals. It is one of the few cities in Arizona where you can get a taste of all four seasons. The Copper Queen Mine, located in what is now called Old Bisbee, is a popular tourist stop when visiting the historic town. Today, we discover the rise and fall of Bisbee, Arizona. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Today we will discuss the rise and fall of Bisbee, Arizona, and the many hardships that ensued, the type of hardship one can best protect themselves against with a good life insurance policy. Knowing that history repeats itself, these stories always move me, so I insure where possible, a task made easy by our sponsor, Policy Genius. Since 2014, Policy Genius has helped over 30 million people shop for insurance and has placed over $120 billion in coverage. Policy Genius helps relieve the stress about paying too much and helps ensure you're getting the right plan at the best rate. So, how does it work? Well, Policy Genius is your one-stop shop for finding and buying the insurance you need. Getting started is simple. Just click the link in the description or head over to policygenius.com/itshistory and answer a few questions about yourself. Their proprietary technology makes it easy to save. You can compare personalized quotes from top companies to find the lowest price and coverage you need in just minutes. You could save 50% or more on life insurance by comparing quotes with Policy Genius. Their licensed experts will help you understand your options and ensure you apply for the right policy. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies, so you can trust them to offer unbiased advice and help you navigate every step of shopping and buying insurance. When you are ready to apply, the Policy Genius team will handle the paperwork and scheduling for free. So head to policygenius.com/itshistory to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. Let's start off with a curious idea. Since the 1860s, mining prospects were often abandoned due to hostilities with the fierce Apache tribes. These circumstances resulted in prospectors working in conjunction with the military. It was the troops themselves that made mineral discoveries. This was the case with the initial findings in the Mule Mountains of southeast Arizona that would later be the site of the Great Copper Camp of Bisbee. In 1877, a reconnaissance detail of Army scouts and cavalrymen was sent to the Mule Mountains to search the area for renegade Apaches. Jack Dunn, a civilian tracker, found signs of mineralization indicating the presence of lead, copper, and possibly silver. The first mining claim was staked in what would later become the city of Bisbee. The filing of this claim sent prospectors and speculators scurrying to the Mule Mountains in hopes of striking it rich. The initial settlement was called Mule Gulch, but was later renamed in honor of DeWitt Bisbee, a San Francisco attorney and one of the financial backers of the Copper Queen Mine. Ironically, Mr. Bisbee is said to have never made the trip to see his namesake town. Bisbee Mine in the late 1870s was a camp of just a few hundred people. The town was eclipsed by its neighbor to the north, Tombstone, which grew to be a boomtown with thousands of residents. Tombstone's silver mines initially allowed for more rapid growth than Bisbee, but it would not be long before copper was king in Arizona, and Bisbee would become one of the greatest mining cities of the West. Mining in the Mule Mountains was quite successful, and Bisbee proved to be one of the richest mineral sites in the world, producing nearly 3 million ounces of gold and more than 8 billion pounds of copper, not to mention silver, lead, and zinc. The Phelps Dodge Company entered the Bisbee mining scene in 1881 with the purchase of the Atlanta claim. In 1885, the company merged the Atlanta with the Copper Queen mine, and the operation would become the second largest producer of copper in the nation during the last 2 decades of the 1800s. Bisbee experienced rapid growth with the success of its copper mines and the arrival of the railroad in 1889. However, Bisbee was described as being a dirty, smoke-filled camp. Drunkenness and violence were common. Before 1900, Bisbee had up to 50 saloons and gambling halls and houses of prostitution. Trash was thrown in the streets, and open sewage pits added stench to the already noxious air. The carcasses of animals laid in the streets. Disastrous floods became a common occurrence, with little vegetation to slow the cascading water during the summer's monsoon season. At the turn of the century, demand for copper continued to rise, and Bisbee continued to grow. The frontier town would soon transition into one of the great industrial cities of the West, and conditions in the city would improve accordingly. There are several mines in Bisbee. The most popular are the Copper Queen Mine and the Lavender Pit. The Lavender Pit was located near the famous Copper Queen Mine and was named in honor of Harrison M. Lavender, who was the vice president and general manager of Phelps Dodge Corporation. The Lavender Pit opened in 1950, produced through to 1974, and brought a total of 86 million tons of ore, averaging about 0.7% copper, or about 600,000 tons of copper produced, leaving gold and silver as byproducts. About 256 million tons of waste were stripped, but a portion of this was acid leached for additional copper. Because of the host rock, this pit has much steeper sides than other open pit copper mines in the southwest. This pit covers an area of 300 acres and is 900 feet deep. However, the Copper Queen mine has a pit of 435 feet deep. In 1917, a dynamite charge blew off the top rock of the crown, and dredges were worked to excavate the pit's ore bodies. By 1931, the pit floor was too narrow for dredges to work in, so the ore was taken out by carving the walls into lower mine levels. Between 1917 and 1931, the mine, which covers nearly 35 acres, yielded 20 million tons of ore, with over 2,000 miles of tunnel. The mine ranks as one of the 5 largest underground mines in the world. The Copper Queen mine was responsible for the growth of the surrounding town of Bisbee in the 1880s. So it's safe to say that in the early 1900s, this was the most productive copper mine in Arizona. From 1899, the town's population grew to around 4,000. In 1902, the population stood at about 8,000. Naturally, with prosperity came an increased population and the need for sanitation, clean water, medical care, building codes, and fire protection. A city charter was approved on January the 9th, 1902, and the city of Bisbee was incorporated. Then, a temporary city council was formed and went to work on these sorely needed civic improvements. In 1910, the city population reached 25,000 people, and so the Cochise County seat was relocated from Tombstone to Bisbee in 1929. Copper was now big business, and the city of Bisbee needed upgrades to accommodate the influx of miners and their families. A sewer system was built in 1908, eliminating the problem of open waste pits. A pipeline was created to bring fresh water from springs 6 miles away, replacing the need to haul water to town manually. Many of the ramshackle buildings from the 1880s and 1890s were being replaced by substantial buildings constructed of brick and stone. Electrical and telephone services were expanded to most parts of town. In 1908, a streetcar line was built between Bisbee and the town of Warren. As most families arrived in Bisbee, the desire and will to clean up the city only increased. By 1910, gambling and prostitution had even been outlawed. In 1917, open pit mining was successfully introduced to meet the copper demand during World War I. The onset of World War I caused a dramatic rise in the price of copper. A high-quality turquoise promoted as, quote, Bisbee Blue, became a byproduct of copper mining. While increased commodity prices were generally seen as a positive development in Western mining towns, the reality was that miners were expected to work harder and sometimes more extended hours, often for the same pay. The influx of new miners to the booming mining town would drive up the cost of living, further exacerbating the grievances of thousands of miners working in the district. A strike was inevitable. In May of 1917, the miners' unions, one of which was affiliated with the Radical Industrial Workers of the World, presented a list of demands. These demands were ultimately rejected. Around 3,000 miners began to strike on June the 27th. The strike was peaceful, but the mine owners feared that the industrial workers of the world members would start trouble, even though less than 20% of the strikers at Bisbee belonged to that union. Considering what was at stake, the Bisbee mines decided to take unprecedented action against the striking miners. Essentially, the company conducted a trial run of deportation on July the 10th. 67 miners of the industrial workers of the world were rounded up and deported. The deportation at Bisbee would be much greater, making it the most significant action ever taken in the West. On July the 12th, 1917, a posse of 2,200 men, led by the sheriff, dispersed through the streets of Bisbee in the early morning hours. The posse had a list of strikers and regular citizens who were thought to be symbolic to the industrial workers of the world. Around 2,000 men were arrested. Some of them were local business owners. The sheriff offered the men an opportunity to denounce the industrial workers of the world and end the strike so they could return to work. About 700 men accepted this offer. The remaining 1,286 detained men were forced onto 23 railroad cattle cars by gunpoint. The train carrying the strikers traveled east to Columbus, New Mexico, where the strikers were to be unloaded. Officials in Columbus protested having the men dumped in their town, so the train turned around and traveled back to Hermans, New Mexico, where it eventually unloaded the men. These men spent over 12 hours on the train, much of the time in 90-degree heat. They were given little or no water and no food. With almost 1,300 penniless men stranded in the desert, New Mexico had a crisis to deal with. The governor of New Mexico, Washington Ellsworth Lindsay, contacted President Wilson and asked for assistance. Federal troops were sent to escort the deportees to Columbus, where they were housed in tents for 2 months until September the 17th. In October 1917, President Wilson appointed a commission to investigate the labor disputes in Arizona. This level of deportation was most undoubtedly illegal and without authority in law, be it state or federal. People involved in the deportation were arrested, but no one was convicted. Unfortunately, none of the deported men were allowed to return to their homes or jobs. The Bisbee deportation of 1917 was not only a pivotal event in Arizona's history, but also affected labor activities throughout the entire country. During almost a century of mining, 8 billion pounds of copper, 102 million ounces of silver, 2.8 million ounces of gold, and millions of pounds of zinc, lead, and manganese was produced. But by 1974, ore reserves had been depleted, and by December, the unavoidable closure of mines in Bisbee were announced. The town desperately had to survive the loss of its only industry. After World War II, a new residential suburb was built out of the canyon about 4 miles from the old town. Most businesses and many residents moved there, leaving many historic buildings to fall into disrepair. When the mining boom ended, the population dropped to less than 6,000. This sent Bisbee's real estate market into collapse. The resulting cheap property attracted retirees, hippies, and others who began restoring Old Bisbee, leading to its establishment as an official historic district. Fortunately, the historic homes and buildings in Bisbee attracted preservation-minded people. Actor John Wayne was a frequent visitor to the town and partnered in real estate ventures early in Bisbee's transition from a mining economy. This repopulation kept Bisbee alive and helped preserve many of the town's most historic structures and old miners' homes. And this is a very unique thing to Bisbee. Most boom towns absolutely deflate once the boom ends. But in Bisbee, there was a short transition of going from a mining industry to that of a retiree community and a busy tourist destination. What might have become another dilapidated former mining camp has regained much of its splendor and is one of the best preserved historic mining towns in the West. The city of Bisbee now includes the satellite communities of Warren, Lowell, and San Jose, with the former two being consolidated into Bisbee during the early part of the 20th century. Warren was Arizona's first planned community. It was designed as a bedroom community for the more affluent citizens. Since the end of mining in the 1970s, Warren has seen a steady decline in its standard of living. However, the residential neighborhood still houses a significant portion of the population that includes City Hall. Lowell was at one time a sizable mining town located just southeast of Old Bisbee. All that is left today is a small portion of Erie Street along with Evergreen Cemetery. These days, Lowell is considered by most residents to be more of a place in name only. Lastly, San Jose, on the southern side of the Mule Mountains, is the most modern of the city's subdivisions. As mountains do not restrict it, it has had the newest growth since the late 1990s. Also, in the 1990s, additional people were attracted to Bisbee, leading it to develop such amenities as coffee shops and live theaters. Many of the old houses have been renovated, and property values in Bisbee now significantly exceed those in the area. The historic city of Bisbee is known as Old Bisbee and is home to a thriving downtown cultural scene. This area is noted for its architecture, including Victorian-style houses and an elegant Art Deco county courthouse. Old Bisbee is compact and walkable because its plan was laid out for a pedestrian scale before the automobile. Bisbee is a culturally rich community that includes an active and varied population. Bisbee retains its welcoming spirit, offering visitors a rich mix of art, music, history, architecture, outdoor activities, dining, ghost tours, and nightlife. The Smithsonian-affiliated Bisbee Mining and Historical Museum has welcomed, educated, and entertained more than 500,000 visitors over recent decades. The world-famous Queen Mine Tour offers a fascinating, up-close experience of the underground world of miners who carved their community and a living out of bedrock. Yearly events like the Bisbee 1000, Bisbee Pride Festival, and Bisbee Historic Homes Tour draws crowds from across the region and across the globe. Ongoing highlights include monthly Bisbee After 5 Art Walk and a weekly farmers market. The town has become a well-known artist community whose architectural and historical heritage has been preserved. The city has transformed itself into the ideal spot for tourism. Bisbee is known as an artist community and thrives on tourism thanks to its citizens' efforts to restore the historic district, but it still holds on to its roots. Mining saw a slight resurgence around 2007 when Freeport-McMoRan Copper and Gold bought out the Bisbee mines. Bisbee's population is at about 5,200 today, a fraction of the former boom days, and some might say that modern tourists arrive to the town because of its eloquent charm and preserved buildings, but I would argue to the contrary, recalling a vision of Bisbee with open-pit sewers and animal carcasses in the streets. The essence of this type of foundation can't simply be whitewashed, and hence we could all agree the town is beautiful, but it's the town's scars that make it mysterious, and mystery is what draws in the tourists. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit that subscribe button for new videos every Thursday and Saturday. Consider becoming a channel member by clicking join. And until next time, this is Ryan Socash signing off.